Sir, one of the things that you told us was that you're licensed in California, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you also indicated that you were licensed in Texas, right?
I still am.
So the answer is yes, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you're not licensed in the state of Arizona, are you?
No, sir.
And you're not licensed in the state of Hawaii, right?
Correct.
And you've testified in Hawaii, haven't you?
Yes, sir.
And you're also not licensed in the state of Tennessee, right?
Yes, sir. Correct.
And in fact, in the state of Tennessee, you testified in a case involving two individuals with the last name of O'Rourke, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
And in that particular case, sir, isn't it true? Overruled. Sir, you testified in the O'Rourke case, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
And that was in Tennessee, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
And in fact, that's the case where the trial court found that you were nothing more than a hired gun, right?
That is what the judge stated.
That's right, at the trial court level, not that at the appellate level, right?
That is correct.
And in fact, he had some other choice words about your testimony, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
And in fact...
Objection, relevance, specific details.
And in fact, he indicated, that judge where you testified indicated that your testimony was completely without merit, right?
I believe something of those facts.
Do you want to take a look at this opinion?
That would be fine. I don't
Sure,
remember his
let's do
exact words, but yes.
If I may have it back.
Oh, okay. So if you ask me more, I'll have to look at it again.
Isn't it true, sir, that the trial court found that your testimony in that case was completely without merit, right?
Don't remember now if he said completely, but yes, generally that's true.
No, not generally. Isn't it true that the court said his testimony was completely without merit? Yes or no? Take a look at it again, 648.
Yes, sir, that is accurate.
And in fact, sir, in that particular case, in the O'Rourke case, you gave an opinion. You were hired by the mother, weren't you?
Yes, I was. Or, well, her attorney.
But you were hired on behalf of the mother, right?
Yes, sir.
It was a child custody dispute, right?
Yes, sir.
And you gave an opinion in that case without speaking to the father, didn't you?
I gave some opinions, yes.
Sir, well, let's take a look at the opinion about what it says. I want you to take a look at page 5. I want you to read it. And then also take a look at the top of page 6 and see what it says.
Did you see the bottom of page 5?
No, page 5 and then the top of page 6.
You're talking about two different cases here. Are you asking me about this case or another case?
I'm asking you about that case. Take a look at it.
Okay, because page 6 you just told me to read is about another case. Okay, just to clarify, are you asking me to read page 5?
Go ahead and read page 5, yes.
Okay, yes, sir. And if you can refresh and tell me what your question was?
Are you done reading it is the question.
Well, I read the paragraph
Yes or no?
about... Yes, sir.
Let me have it back. In that case, sir, isn't it true that in your assistance of the mother, you provided an opinion with regard to whatever the issues were involving the children without talking to the father, right?
Yes.
And in fact, you also and in this case, the opinion is back in 2010, right?
No, sir.
Well, sir, why don't you just take a look at...
That was, the case was before
Sir,
that.
take a look at exhibit number 648, the opinion. What's the date of that opinion? The very top.
The opinion is dated November 10th.
So take a look at it, sir. Just take a look at it.
I did.
All right, if I may have it back.
Yes, sir.
What's the date of the opinion?
The opinion is dated November 2010.
So it is 2010, right?
You asked when I testified. I didn't testify, I believe, in 2010.
Sir, the opinion is dated 2010, correct?
Yes, sir.
You testified in February of a couple years previous to that, correct?
That is correct.
You also were involved in a case in Texas involving an individual by the name of Clark, correct?
Evidently, I don't recall that case, but I know that I did according to the records.
Isn't it true that with regard to that particular individual, you submitted an affidavit, right?
I did.
And in fact, the trial court at that level found that your affidavit lacked credibility. Isn't that what it says?
Evidently.
Do you need to look at this to be...
No, I didn't know it at the time that I submitted and I
I'm
didn't
not
hear.
asking at the time. I'm asking, as you sit here today,
Yes, sir.
isn't it true that you know that the trial court found in the Clark case that you submitted paperwork that lacked credibility, right?
Yes, that was the term.
At that time, when you submitted that affidavit that the court found to lack credibility, you had a number of years' experience as a psychologist, right?
Yes, sir.
You had numbers of years as a neuropsychologist, right?
Yes, sir.
You had a plethora of experience, right?
Yes, sir.
And in fact, even though you had that experience, the court found that you were making things up, right?
Objection to Stacy's opinion.
No,
Making things up, right?
no, the court did not state that at all.
Well, isn't it indicated here that with regard to you, you submitted an affidavit and you talked about things that had happened 5 years prior to the events in question, right?
That's correct.
And you didn't review any court records or transcripts of the trial testimony, and yet you still submitted the affidavit, right?
That is correct.
And what you did rely is you relied on some records out of Pennsylvania, and those were from 1976, weren't they?
I believe that's correct.
And in fact, the conduct that you were looking at, you submitted this in 1992, right?
That part I don't remember. I'd have to look.
And-
If it says that, I'm not going to argue. I just don't remember.
And in fact, this was based on hearsay that was provided by other people, right?
Yes, sir.
You had the same sort of experience in Hawaii, didn't you?
Well, that's, you're going to have to be more specific about the same sort of experience. No, the Hawaii court didn't say I wasn't credible.
Well, the court in Hawaii excluded your testimony, didn't it? In the case involving Hawaii versus French, didn't they?
They excluded one small part of the testimony, not the rest.
So they did exclude part of your testimony, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
And sir, you indicated that, well, when you came in here, that you have worked, haven't ever worked with the defendant in this case, right?
Correct.
You indicated that you haven't worked with the prosecution, right?
Correct.
But you do know Alice Laviolette, right?
Yes, sir.
And in fact, you have been the editor of one of her publications, right?
The book I mentioned, yes.
And so you do have some association with her. You do talk to her, correct?
Yes, sir.
You have talked to her in the past, right?
Yes, sir.
And in fact, your colleagues, correct?
Yes, sir.
And one of the things you also indicated in this case was that you're doing this out of the goodness of your heart, this particular case, right?
No, I never use such terms.
Well, you said that with regard to this case, the only amounts that you're getting paid are your salary, right?
That is correct in all cases.
You're not getting any more money out of this case other than the payments that you get as part of your salary, right?
That is correct.
That nobody is paying you any money for this, right?
Yes, sir.
Even though you're not getting any money for this particular case, sir, you're still the same individual who will go to court if you believe in something and make things up, right?
Objection. Argumentative.
And in fact, in this particular case, you told me that you were contacted last week sometime, right? About testifying in this case, right?
Well, that's partially what I said. I was
Well-
contacted long before. I didn't know until about a week and a half ago that I was actually going to be testifying.
You were contacted in this case with regard to an issue involving this case, what, January of last year? Is that when you were contacted?
No, November.
Of last year.
Yes, sir.
And then, after that, whatever issue that was, that issue was dealt with, correct?
Yes, sir.
And in terms of coming in here and testifying about and criticizing Janine DeMarte's work, you were contacted less than a week ago, right?
No, sir.
Is it 2 weeks ago?
No, unless you want to keep guessing, I can just tell you.
Well, sir, didn't you and I have an interview?
Yes, sir.
And we had that on Monday, didn't we?
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yes, sir.
At that time, I asked you, when was it that you had been contacted about coming in here to testify? Do you remember me asking you that?
Yes, sir.
And you told me it was less than a week before that. Do you remember telling me that?
Yes, sir. Not less than I said about a week ago.
So if Monday is about a week away and now here we are, on Wednesday, that's less than 2 weeks away that you were contacted about testifying here, right?
You asked two different questions.
No, I'm asking, sir, isn't it true that you were contacted and started reviewing the documentation less than 2 weeks ago?
No, that is not correct.
So you started reviewing then, so when you told me that, you were in error when we had that interview, right?
No, you asked a different question.
Sir, and with regard to reviewing these materials for the critique of Janine DeMarte's work here,
Yes.
you started that, according to you, less than 2 weeks ago, right?
No, sir.
So you knew you were going to testify in this case previous to 2 weeks from now.
No, sir.
The question is, first, isn't it true that this profile is consistent with borderline personality disorder? And by this profile, I'm talking about exhibit number 631. Yes or no?
No, that's not the way it would be used.
Take a look at exhibit 650 and start with a paragraph that reads, unfortunately. Take a look at that.
Do you want me to read the entire page?
I want you to read that paragraph, and and once you've read that paragraph, let me know. All right, how many symptoms are we talking about here that are over the threshold? HS is what?
Hypochondriasis.
That's not over the threshold, correct?
Correct.
D is what?
Depression.
That's over the threshold, right?
Yes, sir.
HY is what?
Hysteria.
Is that over the threshold?
Yes, sir.
How about what's PD?
It stands for
You
psychopathic.
keep reading something. Aren't you an expert in this thing?
I was just following to make sure I could
Why
not
don't
see.
you look at the screen if you don't mind?
I can't read the screen you have.
Well,
it
then
on.
I'll bring it up. But your view is that just because the instructions are there, it's bad work on the part of Janine DeMarte because she did not do the summary skills. That's what you told us, right?
No. Oh, shoot.
Go ahead and clean up, please.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was doing so well. Yeah, if they're hand scoring is what you're asking.
Right, if they're hand scoring it, because
Yes,
you
sir.
did this by computer, correct?
Yes, sir.
And what you're saying now, though, is that there is no specific language in those instructions that indicates that it is mandatory to provide summary scales, right?
That is correct.
So this added requirement, or this, not added requirement, this statement on your part that Janine DeMarte did a bad job because she didn't do the summary scales was based on your view that it should be done, not on what the manual says.
You've asked me two questions in there. First, I never used the word bad, period. So,
Oh, you were very glowing about Janine DeMarte's work? Is that what you're telling me?
no, I believe the word that was
No,
asked.
no. Were you glowing about Janine DeMarte's work?
Was I glowing?
Yes. Were you praiseful? Did you praise her work on the stand?
Not that I can recall.
No, you actually criticized her work from the stand, right?
Some of it, yes.
And one of the things that you criticized from the stand involved the TSI, right?
Yes, sir.
And you criticized the fact that she did not have summary scales, right?
Only partially.
The answer is, yes, you did criticize, didn't you? You said she should have done it, right?
I said two things. I said, yes, they are part of that, and yes, she should have known they were part of it. I didn't criticize her for not requiring to do it. I criticized part of it because she didn't evidently know they were there or understand what they were. That's the criticism.
How do you know that she didn't know what she needed to do? How do you know? Can you read mine, sir?
Objection argumentative.
Sir, you didn't speak to Janine DeMarte about it, did you?
No, sir.
You never asked her whether or not she knew about the supplementary scale, the summary scales, did you?
No, sir.
And in fact, you never saw anything in writing that indicated from her that said she didn't know, right?
Objection.
May we approach?
DeMarte, you reviewed her report, right?
Yes, sir.
Nowhere did it indicate in there that she didn't have any knowledge about this, that it was a requirement that this TSI have these summary scales, right?
There was no indication of anything about the summary scales in her report.
That's right, and just because there's no indication in there doesn't mean she's ignorant of it, does it?
No, sir, it does not.
You made that leap, didn't you?
No, sir.
Well,
Shortcut is not a good term.
I understand it's not a shortcut, but the term summary means it's not the whole thing, doesn't it?
It means it's based on a compilation of other things.
But if someone as experienced as you is a clinical psychologist or is an expert in this, to be honest, you don't really need these summary scales. You're way too smart for that, right?
Objection argumentative.
Sir, you can do it. You've had how many years of experience in this?
In trauma or in this
No,
test?
no, no. Total experience in the field of psychology.
35.
To borderline personality disorder.
The study is obviously related. It's
Yes or
about
no?
borderline personality. So it's a double negative. I can't say I don't agree that the study is about borderline when it's obviously about borderline. So I'm not sure. You worded it in a way that sounded like a double negative. So if you could clarify, I could answer.
And you were asked, one of the other things that you talked to us about today was this issue about the frontal lobe, right? Do you remember talking to us about that?
Yes, sir.
How many autopsies have you conducted, sir? If you could just give me, and I know that it may be a lot, so just give me a ballpark figure.
No, I have not. That is not my area of expertise.
So the answer is how many?
0.
You've never gone inside the brain and taken it out and looked at it, have you?
No, sir.
Have you taken a look, do you know what the difference is between a brain that has not decomposed and one that has decomposed? Have you ever done an autopsy to look at that?
I've never done an autopsy.
Have you ever even been at an autopsy where there was a brain that was decomposed?
I don't believe so.
And have you ever even been at an autopsy?
No, I think it was afterwards. I don't think I was at it when they were actually opening up the
And
person.
even though you have never been even to an autopsy, you feel confident in offering an opinion as to what was inside Travis Alexander's brain, right?
No, I wouldn't word it that way.
Take a look at exhibits numbers 654 and 653. If you just look at them yourself.
Yes, sir?
Are you familiar with those photographs?
No, sir.
I thought you just testified and told us about Dr. Horn having, in your opinion, not being accurate with regard to Mr. Alexander and whether or not he received a injury to the frontal lobe.
You're asking 2 questions. You asked me
Well,
about the
I'm asking you,
medical-
are you familiar with that, first of all, yes or no?
These pictures?
You're
No.
right.
No,
Have
sir.
you ever seen them before?
I don't believe so.
And those photographs that you are looking at, they generally depict the inside of an individual's skull, right?
Yes, sir.
They also have some arrows there, right?
Yes, sir.
Do you know what those arrows mean?
No, not without the report or explanation.
In your experience, sir, given your experience as a neuropsychologist, can you tell us the trajectory of the bullet based on those photographs? That
Objection beyond the scope. Beyond expertise.
Overruled.
No, not likely without more explanations.
well, no, but you couldn't do it, right?
No, not likely.
Sir, one of the things that you told us was that there was a pattern of consistency between the tests, right?
Yes, sir.
Well, let's start with the PDS. Question 14 and the answer to number 4. You've been told over and over that that was a lie.
Objection misstates the testimony.
Overruled.
Okay? So we have the PDS that starts out with the lie. Then if we take a look at what we have here in the ELMA, which is 631, and you take a look over here at the validity scales, those are elevated, right?
One of them is, yes.
Well,
Well, the F scale with the FBS are elevated, yes.
I'm asking about the validity scales. They are elevated, right? You're talking about the F scales. Aren't they elevated?
Yes, 2 of the scales are elevated.
And that means that there's an issue as to whether or not there's malingering there, right?
It's a caution you want to
Sure,
look at.
it's a second, it can be the issue of secondary gain, right?
Yes, sir.
So if we're talking about somebody who now on 2 tests has already lied, the pattern is that this person is lying, isn't it?
Objection misstates his testimony.
Overruled. You may answer.
Isn't that what the pattern is?
No, because you just used the word lie. The lie scale is actually not one of the ones that was elevated. What was elevated was one that talks about either exaggerating symptoms or symptom severity. So
Sir.
that's different from lying.
So you're saying that somebody who do you go to the Alice Laviolette school that,
Objection argumentative. And
Sustained.
move to strike.
Sustained.
with regard to exaggeration, sir? So you're saying, for example, that if somebody exaggerates something, they're still telling the truth, right?
They might be, but it depends on how much they're exaggerating. That's a continuum.
So it's their degrees of exaggeration that determine, so when does the exaggeration become a lie for you? Is it 10%, 15%, 20%?
Objection beyond the scope.
Overruled.
There is not a percent where it moves into one or the other that you can define the way you do. When you have something exaggerated, it means that there's other things you have to do to look at it, and you need to be cautious. But exaggeration doesn't mean it's either incorrect or a lie. It means this person is displaying many symptoms.
Didn't you just tell me that it depends on the exaggeration? The answer to my question. Isn't that what you told me?
That was the answer to the prior question, yes.
And so I'm asking you, what standard do you use to determine when an exaggeration, in your mind, becomes a lie?
They're not the same thing.
I'm not asking if they're the same thing, am I?
Well, yeah, you are. You're saying, when does an exaggeration become a lie? You can exaggerate something without the event that's being exaggerated being a lie. They're two different dimensions that you're
Well-
trying to ask me about, and I'm having a hard time answering
All
because
right,
they're
well,
different.
Let's do it by way of example. Let's say that the prosecutor tells you that he's 6 foot tall. Is that an exaggeration or is that a lie?
If we're talking about in this particular
This
case,
prosecutor here, right.
it would likely be both.
Oh, so then a lie can also be an exaggeration, right?
Objection relevance beyond the scope.
Overruled.
It can be.
So when does it become a lie if we're talking about this prosecutor? What if he says he's 6'2"?
I don't know if there's a definitive cutoff that I would know about.
So what you're saying is anybody can exaggerate as much as they want, and to you, that never becomes a lie.
No, I did not say that at
Well,
all.
you're looking at the prosecutor. Do you believe that this prosecutor is 6 foot tall?
I don't believe so, no.
So if this prosecutor told you that he was 6 foot tall and said, I'm exaggerating, would that be the truth? Or would that be a lie, or would that be an exaggeration?
Objection relevance beyond the scope.
Overruled.
If the prosecutor said he was 6 foot tall
Right,
and was
6'2".
6'2" and was exaggerating, what was then the question?
No, you indicated to me that that was an exaggeration. If this prosecutor told you he was 6'2", right?
It could be either.
And you said it could be either. When then, in your opinion, does it become, this exaggeration, become a lie?
I don't know if there's a specific cutoff that you could say like 5'8", 5'9". I wouldn't have a specific criteria that I would move from one to the other. I
Well,
think you have
we're
to
not-
look at the context.
You've now introduced something else. We're not talking about 5'8" or 5'9". I said 6'2". Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
Objection just asked and answered beyond the scope.
Approach.
Of when an exaggeration becomes a lie. In this particular example that we have here, exhibit number 631, we have what we call the validity scale, right?
Yes, sir.
And there's an indication that there's an exaggeration as to 2 of those scales, right?
Potential.
Well, they are clinical, aren't they?
Yes, but as
Yes or no? Are they clinical?
yes,
They are above the threshold, right?
they're above the clinical level.
Right, the clinical level, which is which is what? The little line that we have there, right?
Yes, sir.
What's the number for that line? 65?
Yes, sir.
And they are above that line, 2 of them, right?
Yes, sir.
So if you, in this case, you not only have 1, but you have 2 of the scales that are indicating that there's an exaggeration here, right?
No.
You only have 1 then that indicates an exaggeration?
No, they give you 3 possible indicators, which is what I tried to explain, but you cut me off. Those 2 don't just look at exaggeration. They give you 3 alternative possibilities when they're in the clinical level, one of which is exaggeration.
Right. And what you're choosing to do as you sit there on the witness stand is ignore the exaggeration and just look at the other two, right?
No, sir.
Well, let's talk about the exaggeration. That's what I want. Would you agree with me that two of them could be exaggeration, right?
Yes.
And exaggeration is the same thing or akin to or is in the same neighborhood as a lie, right?
No, I actually think
So
I'm
the
going to
answer is
have...
no.
The answer would be no.
And is there ever a time where you would consider that an exaggeration, as we have on the MMPI, would be considered a lie? Ever?
I probably would not use the term lie with an elevation on the F scale. Would not be appropriate to use that term for that scale.
So the answer is never, correct? For
Yeah,
you?
correct.
Sir, we talked about her report.
Yes, sir.
Janine DeMarte's report, right?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember that I asked you, with regard to her report, whether or not there was anything in that report that suggested to you that she didn't know or lacked the training with regard to these tests?
My understanding was you asked me specifically about the TSI, and my answer reflected the TSI. I don't recall you asking me about the floating
All right,
profile or the other
So
things.
it's about the TSI then.
Correct.
And so in this, and the TSI, is this the test that involves the summary scales, right?
Yes, it is.
And you now indicated to us, as part of the questioning, that part of the reason that you believe that she lacked the training with regard to these scales or this test was based on what the defense attorneys told you, right?
Yes.
But now you then want to talk about something else, right? About some other test, right?
I thought you were now generalizing it to the other tests.
Do you want to? No. My question to you is, isn't it true that now you started to talk about the MMPI, right?
I thought that's what you asked me.
No, then you thought wrong then, right?
Evidently, I'm not clear exactly what you're asking me.
So the only test where you believe that she didn't have any training with that we've discussed is the TSI then, right?
Okay, are we now referring to the report?
TSI.
No.
I'm talking about the TSI only,
Oh,
right?
and could you ask again?
And with regard to the TSI, so that we're clear, there's nothing in the report or any other data that suggests she needed training, she being Janine DeMarte,
Not in the report, that is correct.
and in any other data that you received, correct?
I think that's likely correct because I don't recall records that it would indicate that.
But because of what the defense attorneys told you, now you do have an opinion that she lacked training, right?
In part, also in part to the interpretation of the TSI.
Sir, do you remember being asked that question by the jury?
By
Do you
the
remember?
jury?
Yes. And you don't remember being asked this question about the jury about whether or not why you thought Janine DeMarte lacked training? Do you remember being asked that by the
Yes, I do.
And do you remember your answer?
I think so.
And do you remember that after that there was follow-up by defense counsel?
Yes, sir.
And the issue was laid out that you actually talked to them, right?
Yes, sir.
And at that time you indicated, oh, it was because of what they told me that I decided or I realized that she lacked training. Do you remember saying that?
Yes, sir.